And you know why I wanted to be a dictator? Because I want a wall, right? I want a wall, and I want to drill, drill, drill. Yeah, well, we did.
Donald Trump wants to turn the U.S. into his own fascist state.
I like the Constitution. I like it the way it is. I don't want to have it rewritten for me by people in Washington.
Legendary musician Frank Zappa, like many, despise it. After all, Donald Trump, the leader of the Republican Party, reportedly made $2.4 billion during his presidency. In addition, through the help of funneling our own tax dollars, his businesses hauled in roughly $650 million.
Let our minds drift back to the early days right before Reagan made his big run. There was a deal made between the fundamentalist right and the Republican Party, literally purchasing the platform. If you stick the prayer in school on here, if you stick the abortion on here, money, the land of milk and honey will flow in your direction.
I mean, is that any different than politics of the Democratic Party?
There's so much money involved, and I think that it has been the ruination of the GOP.
Zappa sees the root of the problem: money in politics.
You would never abuse power as retribution against anybody.
Except for day one.
It's clear what his plan is, especially when he goes on the attack to those who oppose him.
People who are artistic have always been a threatening force to people who are dictators. And even though we call this country a democracy, it's turning out to be more and more a candy-coated dictatorship. And so it seems fairly logical that the people who would like to convert this country into a candy-coated dictatorship would do everything they could to make it impossible for people who communicate through the arts to say anything that might resemble a message like the emperor isn't wearing any clothes. That's the thing that they're most afraid of. Anybody who will say anything that equates to the emperor's not wearing any clothes, for some reason that scares the out of them.
The situation that we have right now is a cartoon president who is an actor. The guy is an actor. They should have given him an Academy Award and let it go at that.
Incredibly, Zappa's words fit the billing when he was talking about Reagan and...
You're fired. 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 You're fired.
This guy, clearly it fits, who went from steaks to casinos to planes to acting.
If everybody had good mental health, then all the other problems would be solved. Because in order to take care of mechanical and practical problems, you have to have good mental health in order to attack those problems. If people have motives that are not worthwhile, then those bad motives are always going to creep into their activities. And you see that every day from the way the political people work. If people were just in a position to have their minds functioning right, then everything else would fall into line. Now, that's what I'm after. That's my dream. Now, that's a dream. That's probably not going to happen, but that's my dream.
Speaking of mental health.
Guns, no guns, it doesn't matter. You have people that are mentally ill, and they're going to come through the cracks, and they're going to do things that people will not even believe are possible.
Republicans love to blame it on mass shootings instead of the lax laws they enable because they're bought by the gun lobby. However, what if I told you when presented with the opportunity to fund more mental health services, 205 Republicans voted against it?
What's going on now is the single greatest scam in the history of American politics.
Zappa would also touch on how Republicans dupe people.
I recall throughout the 80s receiving fundraising mail from the Republican Party that was basically an invitation to participate in insider trading, and it went like this. How would you like to join the California Golden Circle? You pay $2,500 to get in, $1,500 a year in dues. Now here's what you get. Advance notice of upcoming legislation, invitations to dinners and social events that will be attended by the people from California who do the business, who really make the deals. So in other words, if you pay, you're going to be invited to these dinners where you get to sit next to these people who make the big deals. And I got another letter inviting me for $2,500, I could go on this junket to Washington, D.C., where I get to attend a series of luncheons and dinners with D.C. political luminaries. And they give you a list, and you are supposed to check off on the list who you want to be seated next to at these luncheons. And then there's another box you had to check off that said, it's always possible that the president himself will come to one of these, so we need you to give us permission to run a security check on you and just authorize here. There's something weird about doing politics, mail-order politics that way, and inviting people to get the edge on a business competitor by joining a certain political party, paying money. And to carry this to the most ridiculous extreme.
You believe in punishment for abortion, yes or no, as a principle?
The answer is that there has to be some form of punishment.
For the woman?
Yeah, there has to be some form.
If you were going to be a Republican, you ought to focus on what Republicans are supposed to be good at, which is let's do business, okay? And I think business is good for the whole world. People like to do business. But when you start trying to legislate morality, you've got a problem. You know, it doesn't work. It hasn't worked in the past. It won't work in the future.
Yeah, but if anything goes, there's got to be some sense of responsibility, don't you think?
There's a difference between responsibility and adherence to dogma. When the dogma becomes legislation, that's when you have the danger.
I am your president of law and order.
Even as the decades go on, the similarities remain as outlined by Zappa, discussing a former president from yesteryears.
Getting to Nixon. Nixon was not a good guy. He was a creative guy. He was a very neurotic guy, a paranoid guy. And I think he did an awful lot of damage to the imagination, or the way in which the American public imagines government should be. They would like to be able to have some respect and some belief in the presidency, and Nixon blew it. Nixon doing these pitiful things that had some really grotesque implications for the future of democracy in this country. Setting up a secret police to spy on U.S. citizens. I mean, that's the core of Watergate. It's not that he broke in to find out what the Democrats were doing at election time. He set up COINTELPRO to spy on U.S. citizens with a slush fund and was relying on this network of very naughty people in the background who just thought it was the best thing that they could do.
Zappa also sees through the fear-mongering tactics Republicans deploy when blaming any form of music as the reason for the country's despicable lack of action towards gun violence, instead of legislating the root cause of the problem.
This could be a really great publicity stunt, and I'm sure the media eats it up because you get to have a term, porno rock. It sounds terrific. You're going to get a lot of mileage out of it. But the real fact is this. Every authoritarian regime likes to get this little hook going for them. You tell people sex equals sin. And now I'm going to save you from sex. And that will save you from sin. And then you get to go to heaven. And we did it for you. So send in your check today. That's what this stuff is.
It is truly incredible when going back through the archives and seeing this man practically predict what would happen with the empire of the United States. Personally, I can't get enough. Meanwhile, if there are any stories we missed, if there are any that you would like to submit, get at me and follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. DMs are open. And please, if you can, support the network, go to tyt.com/join.